All right, so our first game of the day, well, our first game of the second part of today is going to be Larva versus Mine, two of my favorite players at the moment. And we'll be able to see if they go Super Saiyan mode, if they're playing at their absolute best, or if this is going to be another derpy game from Larva. As we just saw in the KCM Race Wars, Larva can play absolutely excellently 1 second and then in the next moment make one of the dumbest mistakes possible in the entire game. So, I mean, it really just depends on his mood on any given day, and if he's tilted or not, really, that's what it comes down to. So this is going to be a very, very standard map. It's going to be Circuit Breaker. This is taken from stream on, this is going to be from August the 14th, so about last week. It's actually been about a week and a half since this game was actually played, but still, I mean, honestly, there's quite a bit to talk about. And nonetheless, it's not really necessarily considered quote-unquote an old game. There's still plenty of stuff to talk about. So, as expected, both players are going to be opening up pretty similarly. Don't expect to see anything crazy coming out from either player. So let's just talk about some of the potential mid-game decisions for Zerg, because I'm all about talking about things, talking about ways that Zerg can get ahead, because Zerg is awesome. Terran sucks. So, when we think about Zerg openings, we think about the 3-hatch build into Mutalisks, into Lurkers and Hive while you take your 3rd base. And then you take your 4th base, get 4 gases, and then blast out a bunch of units. This is kind of the formula that Savior established back during his reign of terror, back when he was considered probably the best player in the entire world, going against every single race at a time when Zerg was considered very, very underpowered. He just found ways to completely dominate people. And this standard 3-hatch Muta build is one of the core tenets of that evolution. This is why he became so good. So when you go for 3-hatch builds, you give yourself a lot of economy. Your attack is a little bit later, but you have tons and tons of economy, and you can push into your opponent very early on, do a lot of damage with potential very strong Mutalist attacks or very strong Lurker attacks. And the one thing you really have to worry about is, can my opponent just kill me before then? If your opponent can kill you before then you just have to make sure that you build good static defense, make sure you have enough units in place. Quick note, real quick, is Mine is going for the double racks build. That is going to be a pre-Mutalist timing, so the idea is that by getting the 2nd racks early on, you get a lot more units out, and it basically allows you to push out just as the Mutalists are starting to build. You end up at the natural base before the Mutalists get out. You can do quite a bit of damage if the Zerg player is playing a little bit greedy with their Larva. In any case, so Zerg players basically from that point on just went for this 3-hatch build. There was a short time period during Jaedong's era where 2-hatch Mutalist builds sort of came back into favor, and that was largely just because players like Jaedong and Luxury were just really, really good at playing Mutalists. Like, their Mutalist micro was just absolutely insane. So seeing that sort of build and resurgence was entirely based on the backup skill, not even because the build itself was all that good. 3-hatch is still the standard, still very, very strong. So you go for 3-hatch build, you get 9 to 11 Mutalists very quickly. It allows you to take center map control, and with that center map control, you can take a 3rd base very quickly and reinforce that with Lurkers. Basically, the Lurkers prevent any of the bio from getting on top of the high ground, because 2 to 3 Lurkers can hold almost indefinitely against bio unless there's a very dedicated attack. And as long as you have units in position to actually deal with it, it's basically impossible for Terran to actually break up the ramp versus that. And I'm going to go a little bit into this a little bit later on about how Terrans have kind of adapted to that change and figured that out, but it's not really important right now. The main thing is that Zerg can take that third base with the lurkers and start taking up to Hive, start getting defilers out. And once you have the defilers out, then you have a very strong timing attack. Sorry, you have a very strong, not a timing attack, you have a very strong economy with which to build nothing but non-stop defiler, lurker, ling, defend your 3 bases, because with Dark Swarm, Terran really can't push in. And then behind that, you can take a 4th and start getting your really meaty tech up, getting all of your upgrades, getting the Ultralisk out, etc., etc. So that is the very basic standard of it. And the small things that we've seen Terran players, or the small things that we've seen Zerg players do, is sometimes they'll just stick straight to going into the lurkers and just skip out on the Mutalisk entirely. So this is the pre-Mutalisk timing that's going to be coming out right now, and you can see Larva's actually going to be building actually a couple of evolution chambers. And this is basically just a mess with the AI as the units are trying to move in. He's going to have to pull all of his drones, and this is a little bit devastating for him. Also having the overlords out in front is really nice, because it also soaks up a few more shots from the Marines. Luckily he does survive, but this was a little bit greedy for him. He ends up losing a couple of drones in the process, and losing a little bit of extra money that he really shouldn't have had to lose. But at this point he gets his Mutalisk up very early, which allows him to start pressuring, allows him to start taking this third base. If you end up building an extra subgroup of Lings, it ends up being very problematic for you in terms of having enough money to take this third base, having enough pressure out on the map to go ahead and start working on it. So good unit micro so far, going to be able to clean up that entire group of units, and behind this he's just going to be wanting to get his third base up and start checking into the Hydralisks to get the lurkers up, secure that third base high ground. And this is, I think, is always a very important thing to note as well. After you get your first initial mutas, you want to go ahead and start going into a handful of Lings. Make sure you have enough Lings to support your Mutalisks. Once you have a subgroup of Lings plus your Mutalisks, you basically want to put it in between any armies that Terran puts out on the map. If Terran plays very defensively, you don't really have to do much with the Mutalisks. You can still look for potential opportunities to kill off units, to snipe a couple of SCVs here and there, etc. But your main focus is just on keeping the Terran pinned back, and if the Terran ever gives up on being pinned back and decides, you know what, hey, I'm going to go attack, then you can start attacking this way, peel off a couple of units, or potentially put your Mutalisks and Lings in between these units and their reinforcements and pick them off. Not the greatest unit micro there from Larva. He's actually going to lose a couple of Mutalisks for free, so not the best work there so far. But he does have his Queen's Nest up. He's going to be teching in a Hive very soon. He's just started his Lurker tech, and he's going to be going very nicely into a strong mid to late game. This is overall very nicely done from him. Rebuilding Mutalisks whenever he loses some, that's also a very core tenet of this matchup. It's a little bit difficult, I think, early on if you're new to this game. I know I definitely had a lot of problems with building specific numbers of Mutalisks, but just recognizing, like, when you lose 2 to 3 Mutalisks, realizing that that's the exact number that you lost, and rebuilding that exact number is very important for you, just to make sure that you always have the correct number of units. So right now at this point, Larva is just going to be sharking around, looking for his opponent, making sure that there's no potential pressure coming in on either side. He's going to go ahead and start the Defiler Den immediately, so he's going to go ahead and get Defilers very quickly. And more Marines out of the map, trying to get map control. Mine really hasn't been able to get much pressure done, despite his opening doing quite a bit of decent damage. And a lot of that is just due to the fact that Larva is doing a really good job with his Mutalisk micro, doing a really good job of just killing off units here and there, and finding small groups of isolated units like this to kill them off. So very nicely done so far, but the first couple of Science Vessels are out, And now that Irradiate is out on the map, there's a very good chance that these Beetles will not be able to do much for the rest of the game. And Larva, uncharacteristically, having a few little snafus there in his macro, making a couple of small precision errors. Not really too important, but something to note nonetheless. So first 2 science vessels are out. That's also going to make it a lot easier to break this high ground. And Larva doing the smart thing, he's going to patrol on top of his other lurkers and burrow. And this basically makes it impossible to properly irradiate all of those lurkers. If you have all 3 lurkers spread out, it's very easy to irradiate them. But if they're all sitting on top of each other, you end up just irradiating the same one over and over and over. Now, because his opponent went for that SK Terran style, he's going to be looking very closely to make sure that there's no drop play coming into his third base, no drop play coming into his main. That's going to be a very important thing coming up in the next couple of moments. I don't know if you saw that, but he actually, as he was moving in there with his Mutalisk, he actually pressed hold position for a second, which allowed him to naturally spread out his Mutalisk before they actually got engaged upon with the Irradiate. So it's actually a really cool play there coming out from Larva. Not particularly amazing play or anything, just a small little optimization that you can do. And so Larva has managed to prevent the third base up in the top right-hand corner from going down. He's going to be getting all of his extra infrastructure up. He's going to be starting to work on potentially getting up a fourth base. There's most likely a big push coming down here with 4 science vessels. Wow, that's actually so much. And luckily, he does already have the Darkstorm down, so he's going to be in good shape to go ahead and start pushing this back, especially once he gets a couple of lurkers underneath this Darkstorm. So killing off one of the observers, or is one of the science vessels, so very good from him. And mine is actually transitioning very quickly into mech play. It's a little bit confusing, but oh wow, a racer trick coming in. That's a little bit surprising to see. As long as you split well and send a couple units through the Nidus Canal, it's not too bad, but either way, this is that was actually pretty devastating overall for the economy of Larva. He actually ended up losing quite a few drones, but killing off all of the vessels is a very good trade for him overall. Mind is going to be going into that mech play right now. He's slowly getting up all his factories, lifting off whatever barracks he doesn't need. And this is not quite as good of a mech transition as we normally see, because normally you want to go ahead and start getting those vultures out there, start mining out the fourth while you're still putting pressure on the natural with your bio. In this particular case, Mine spent a lot of resources into doing a lot of damage up in that fourth base, and that means that he doesn't really have a lot out on the map to punish his opponent for being out of position in different places. But right now we're going to be seeing a push coming out from Larva, trying to retake this area on his low ground, trying to go ahead and get position so he can start taking his fourth base and getting that up and running. Mind doing a fantastic job of just avoiding all those swarms and running backwards. So he's going to be able to start mining this up now, but like I said, the mines are a little bit too late. At this point, there's already been quite a few mines that have, or there's been quite a lot of ground that's already been covered and is no longer really viable to defend. But again, wow, fantastic play coming out from Larva, always just on top of making sure that he has units in position to potentially deal with any sort of science vessel shenanigan that might be coming in. Now he's got his double upgrades coming in. He's got adrenal glands on the way as well. So his links are going to start getting very, very strong, very scary very soon. And already they're doing actually pretty decent damage overall. It's just that Larva really wants to get this fourth base up. Once you get the fourth base up as Zerg, you can start going into a much later stage portion of the game where you can start getting that Ultralisk mound up. You can start getting tons and tons of gas units, and start banking gas for big tech switches, which is really a very important tenet of this portion of the game. So lots and lots of minerals for Larva, you can see right now. Hopefully he'll be going ahead and adding on a couple more hatcheries to increase his production, make sure that he has enough to actually do, make sure that he has enough production to actually spend all of his money that's going to be coming in once his fourth base gets saturated. Doing a really good job so far of just being annoying with these Mutalisks and causing a little bit of damage. And as much as this bunker is normally very useful, right here it's not so good. And even a couple of lings going up to the top left-hand corner is going to be able to start pushing this down. A very surprising push coming in from Mine down in the bottom left-hand corner, and a little bit of a mistake from Larva to not have any of his defilers in position. So a lot of these lurkers are actually going to go down for free, and that's actually a pretty big deal. It's going to basically open up this base to all of these vultures to get a lot of damage done, but luckily the lings are already Super Saiyan. They're all really strong so far, so it's going to basically allow him to clean this up pretty nicely. Unfortunately, there are a couple of annoying things going on right now in Larva's base. He did manage to do a little bit of damage up to the top right-hand base, but easy liftoff easily cleans that up. And Mine is putting the vice grip on this bottom left-hand base and really punishing Larva for not having a defiler in position. You really need to make sure you always have a defiler ready to go in position into your fourth base and in your natural. If you don't really have that, then you find yourself in a lot of trouble trying to actually defend against these pushes like this. Another run by coming up into the top right-hand corner. We'll be able to see if that's actually strong enough to deal with that. These couple of units just kind of sitting out in the middle of the map. Larva realized that, oh, hey, I can actually use these. So he's eventually going to be able to clean this up, but there is a vulture up in his third base that he's not paying attention to, and that could cause a lot of problems for him. Luckily, he does have this very nice defiler lurker small subgroup that he's actually using to go ahead and attack over there. So very well played so far by Larva overall. He did lose a lot of drones over there, unfortunately. However, he's managed to clean up this mineral line for now, and he's still got a Dark Swarm over there, so he's in a pretty good spot. And now the Ultras are coming out. This is why you want that fourth base, so you can bank up a lot of gas. But if you look at the supplies, at this point, losing a lot of those units in his natural was a pretty big deal for Larva, and losing all those drones has severely crippled his economy, so he's down by 70 supply. 60, 70 supply, even though he's got basically all the configuration, all the things that he needs. He still hasn't reached a point where he actually has a strong army, he actually has a thriving economy. So he's going to continue to blast out tons and tons of Ultralisks and just try to start breaking these mine lines with just lots and lots of links. You really don't want to run your Ultralisks through there, but honestly, considering how strong mines are just in general against Zerg, you really just need to find ways to get through it. And one of my favorite ways is just making a handful of Mutalisks. Find those Mutalisks that he made earlier, just go ahead and grab 3 of them with a speed overlord and just start running around and killing off mines. It's really that simple. You don't need to go for anything fancy, just as long as you're cleaning them up without too many problems. These Ultras are soaking up quite a few mines, but considering that mines are free, mines are basically, they cost no money at all, just minerals. It's a little bit questionable if that's actually a good decision from him. He's going to try to get these lurkers onto the high ground and start being annoying, maybe even get into the mineral line with them, but doesn't look like it's going to happen. All of them are going to go down before they get anything done, and Larva's just grasping for straws. He's trying to find a way back into this game, but he just took way too much damage earlier, and Mind has just completely taking control of the center of the map with good mines. Has done a really good job of completely dominating his opponent, and even with all of these Scourge coming out, they're not going to be able to kill off, well, actually I take that back, they kill off quite a few of those science vessels, but I think that without too much trouble, this should be an easy hold for Mind. He's still got 178 supply versus barely over 100 for Larva. Larva's desperately trying to find a way to start pushing back in this game. He's taking the mineral only base up by his main. He's going to want to try to take that 9 o'clock base as soon as he can, but by spending more and more money just throwing units in here, he is putting himself in a position where he has a chance to lose in the next couple of minutes. He didn't kill off that tank down at the low ground. That is terrible. He's trying to get on top of these units, but without Overlord drops, without any sort of an air switch, it's really difficult to actually break that high ground area up in the top right. It's not going to happen anytime soon. His best bet is just drilling through the middle and trying to break that 3 o'clock base, trying to split up reinforcements, but at this point he's lost so much room in the middle of the map that it's difficult for him to actually even get in there and properly stop his opponent from having presence in the middle of the map. And the mech upgrades are going to be kicking in very, very, very soon. 3-3 is going to be absolutely dominant versus the Zerg army and be able to completely annihilate everything they have. A good swarm so far are going to be able to allow units to get right on top of this, but he needs to continue casting the swarms. He decides to go for the plague. He's just going to try to get as much damage done on these units as possible before trying to reinforce and go on top of them. But honestly, at this point, you just need ground. That's the most important thing, is trying to get as much space between you and the mech army as possible so you can continue to macro. If you continually allow units to just run underneath and play it more spider-mines and siege up, it's going to be problematic for you over and over. Another eraser trick coming in from mine may be able to kill off a lot of drones here over in the 4th base. But this is pretty brutal so far. Everyone's going to try to break this blockade over here by the double ramp by sending a lot of units out across the map. Actually, he's just going to be going for that 9 o'clock base, as I said earlier. But lots of mines already in position. They're going to be able to slow down this push, prevent it from getting the maximum amount of damage done. And with this huge siege tank army still pushing at his 4th base, he's in a lot of trouble in the next couple seconds. Sorry, I had to sneeze. But luckily, Swarm is pretty amazing, even versus mech. 2 to 3 lurkers underneath the Swarm will prevent mech from ever pushing forward, even a little bit. You can see his frustration. He's really trying to push forward, get something done. He managed to break this 3 o'clock base, so that's really good for him, and kill off a lot of SCVs. Very well done, and forcing mine to pull some of his units back. So this was overall a win for Larva, but he's still finding himself over 50 supply behind, still finding himself desperately just trying to get bases around the map before his opponent kills him. He's going to go ahead and try to take the 12 o'clock base, but it looks like it was blocked by a mine. He's not able to quite take the 3 o'clock base, or the 9 o'clock base either. So a bit of problems there. And Mind is back to mining over there in the 3 o'clock base. He's going to have lots of units there pretty soon. And finally taking that 9 o'clock base for Larva, trying to get some of that control back. He really needs to just go ahead and focus on spending all of his money on getting units to the top side of the map and breaking that 9 o'clock or that 3 o'clock base yet again, because the longer that he tries to continue just running his units out of this 4th base into tanks, just running into the meat grinder over and over and over, the less he's actually going to get done. He's going to go ahead and try to go for a surround on this army and just kind of save this 9 o'clock base from going down, but I'm not sure that it's going to be enough. It feels like a little bit too late, too little. Or, well, too little, too late, rather. Either way, the base is going to be going down, and this blockade over by the double ramp is still going strong. A good couple of swarms going to be going down on top of these units and may eventually allow these units to clean up, but it has been a very painful experience so far. Lots of gas units going down for Larva in the process. He's going to go ahead and try to break out across the middle of the map yet again. These tanks over here by the 9 o'clock base are still hanging out over there, still doing work. And as much as Larva would like to break out of these bases, he just can't seem to quite find a foothold. Mine perpetually sitting at max now, having no problem maxing out every single time he loses a tank, every time he loses a vulture. It's no big deal, and now just Ling's running straight into Goliath and getting killed. This, you know, this is when the game is over, when you have to rely entirely on basic units versus 3-3 mech units, which all do well versus the basic units of Zerg. He's going to continue to try to push in here, but there's so many tanks, and even unsieged tanks do very well versus the Ultras. They're going to be able to kill them off. And again, this blockade at the double ramp is just absolutely too strong. It's so hard for Larva to actually get a foothold. He's going to push out across this base again. A pretty good swarm is going to allow him to pick up that one siege tank. And slowly he is whittling away the siege tank count. But if you look at the supplies, that tells the entire story. Down 100 supply, barely holding on to this fourth base. And Mine is just continually sending units out across the map. He doesn't mind if he loses too many units. He can just continue to reinforce, and now this is broken. Larva quits. There's the GG. I love that he just like leaves.